I will present evidence for this claim, but my claim is that Sonic the Hedgehog is a narrative about a conflict between a son and father over the affection of their mother as represented by the Chaos Emeralds, and a more general conflict. You may think this is a bit of a stretch at first, but if you follow along and see how the elements relate to each other, it becomes more and more compelling. I'm not saying the game designers did any of this on purpose, though I think they did some things on purpose, but just that Sonic the Hedgehog was a manifestation of their subconsciouses, of whoever was responsible for designing these and placing these particular game elements. This game, being the first in a series, was much more experimental than the later Sonic games. Afterwards, it just became marketing. I'm not a psychologist or psychotherapist, I'm just doing this to have fun, so take this with a whole container of salt. I'm going to be analyzing this like a dream analysis. First, let's look at Sonic as a metaphor. We see he's blue, he's like a baby blue boy. The front is that he's a hedgehog, but he has a tan, he has human-colored skin, he has hands, and he has shoes, and so clearly this is a person. He has a constant scowl and looks at you when you're not looking, when you're not playing. His spiky back resembles a mohawk, but it's such a mohawk that it covers his entire back. We see this as a struggle of a rebellious boy. As Sonic's head is very large compared to his body, like that of a child. I always thought that skin-colored tummy thing was kind of odd, but it's there to remind us that he's really human, and Sonic is the signifier of an inner child. And of course, the tummy is where the umbilical cord is. At the end of every level, Sonic fights Robotnik, who's in a flying car. The fact that it is flying can be seen as just another dream exaggeration, like Sonic's body itself. Though it does work metaphorically, and Sonic's father is holding his ability to drive above Sonic. That's why Sonic's speed is so important. Sonic is faster than cars and could possibly run with cars. In Starlight Zone, he's able to run on roads. Cars and driving are often associated with traveling through life, but Sonic, in his rebellion, is convinced he doesn't need his father. He is fast enough to run himself. He can run with the cars. And I know running with cars is a dream that others have often had and that I have often had. So this is not a totally out there interpretation. These are dreams that are known to be kind of common. Obviously not as common as something like falling dreams, but they are recurring in many people. In every level, we can see that Sonic is constantly getting bugged by his father's creations. These are obviously his father's ideas that literally infest Sonic's life, and language has a huge impact on dreams. And when interpreting my own dreams and the dreams of others, I often have aha moments when I analyze the language. When you have dreams where bugs are attacking you and stuff, try to think of what in your life is bugging you. Now, I happen to think it's Robotnik's ideas that are bugging Sonic, but it could just be Robotnik bugging Sonic like a parent bugs a child all the time. And the enemies are all bugs, bats, and even fish. They're all pests of some type. And so some aspect of Robotnik is bugging Sonic throughout the game. Now, the rings have significance in this game. They are scattered throughout the level. If you get 100 rings, you get an extra life. If you get 50, then at the end of the level, a giant ring appears and sends you to a special stage in which Sonic is in a ball the entire level and has to navigate a psychedelic maze to get to the emerald at the end. The color of the level is similar to when you close your eyes and press your fingers on your eyelids, which I'm sure you can imagine since we've all done it. When you get hit by one of Robotnik's pests, you lose all of your rings. Now let's take a look at the story according to Wikipedia about Sonic the Hedgehog 1. Quote, Sonic is a blue hedgehog who lives on South Island with his animal friends. In this first chapter of an ongoing saga, Sonic encounters an evil scientist by the name of Dr. Robotnik. Yes, Dr. Robotnik. For the first time. Dr. Robotnik seeks to obtain the powerful Chaos Emeralds for the purpose of creating Robotnik Land, and sets about transforming animals into robots to serve his ends. Realizing Dr. Robotnik's evil ambitions, Sonic pursues him through several of the world's zones before eventually defeating him in Scrap Brain Zone. Following this victory, Sonic returns home to South Island to rejoin his friends and resume his normal life. Okay, so Sonic and Robotnik are fighting over the emeralds. And as stated before, I believe the emeralds represent Mother. Even if you don't agree, I hope you can at least see the connection. Emeralds are obviously female, right? Like diamonds. I have two interpretations of the rings and the emeralds thing. It is a bit unique to have golden rings as the standard item. Most platformers have coins or diamonds, but golden rings, the designers were obviously thinking about this a little bit. The first interpretation is that catching the ring is like growing up. This comes from The Catcher in the Rye, where Holden Caulfield was describing how on the carousel, if a child could grab a ring that passed by, the child got an extra ride. Older children were the ones who could catch rings, and so catching the ring was a sign of growing up. Similarly, if you catch 100 rings in Sonic, you get an extra life. And this is congruent with the theory of Sonic being in youthful rebellion, like Holden Caulfield. It also makes sense, and also like saving the other robots from destruction. Right? Like Holden was trying to save the other children. If you catch at least 50 rings by the end of each level, a giant ring appears in which Sonic jumps into to enter the special stage. I see this like the womb. The reason it is psychedelic is because Sonic cannot remember all the way to the womb. The womb itself is the ultimate youth and the ultimate embellishment of memory, a complete failure of memory. Notice, when you have memories of times in the past, they become more and more dramatic, and so people actually tend to remember their past as more dramatic than it really is, because that's all they remember, the specific dramatic instances, not the long, boring periods. And if you go, and the further back in the past you go, the more embellished it becomes, and so Into the Womb would be the ultimate embellishment of memory. Whatever it is, it's obviously a womb. Sonic is in the fetal position through the entire level. And of course, if you catch all the emeralds, giant pink flowers bloom. Just look at that thing. It's obviously female underregions. Flowers are female. Sonic gets all the emeralds to become one with Mother. If he doesn't get all the emeralds, there are no flowers in the final scene. Sonic is in the fetal position all throughout the special stages, struggling to get through all of the bullshit in order to get to Mother. The Catcher in the Rye explanation doesn't address the special stages very well, as how would growing up, catching 50 rings, cause Sonic to return to the womb? So, I at least see how that explanation doesn't fit in some ways. I believe a better explanation involves Carl Jung's archetype that the golden ring, golden ball, and golden circle related images represent youth. All three of these are found in the first level, and rings are found throughout the entire game. Furthermore, Jung's archetype explains how when Sonic gets hit by one of Robotnik's pests, he loses his rings. He loses his youth. And that was a kind of a unique thing that they did there. Instead of having a life bar, Sonic loses his golden youth representing rings. If Sonic gets hit without any youth representing rings, Sonic, a caricature of a rebellious child, dies. The first person's inner child, Sonic, dies. And so it may be noteworthy that the final bosses of Sonic 1 and 2 occur without any rings, and the final boss of Sonic 3 and Knuckles doesn't have any rings after the respawn point. So if you die fighting the boss, you have to go fight the boss without any rings. And it's clear that the developers were doing this intentionally. I can see how the Jungian explanation fits better than the Catcher in the Rye explanation. I think both the Catcher in the Rye and Jungian explanations work together. The Catcher in the Rye explains the rebellious little boy who's out to save the other kids, while Jung's archetypes explain the rings and the special stages. Now let's look at the stages themselves. First we have the Green Hill Zone. It's relatively bright, happy, youthful, and free. In debug mode, you can find a large ball that Sonic rolls around on, which is sort of golden colored, and as stated before, that represents youth. Sonic is happy and playful, but is continually bugged by his father's pests. I don't ascribe any significance to the invincibility, extra life, or shield power-ups, nor do I place any significance on the number of rings 100 needed to get an extra life. These game elements were established in many previous games. Fish jump out of water, which represents the subconscious. Right now, these fish and the water make little cameos, but later in the game, Sonic will explore those depths. The killer fish jumping out of the subconscious to attack the inner child is an ominous sign, to say the least. One may be now, obviously, jumping fish out of water had already been established in Mario games, but this interpretation fits for in the context of later levels in the games. At the end of the stage, Robotnik is flying a car. Robotnik lowers a golden ball down to Sonic's level, which represents youth. He uses this youth ball to hit Sonic, causing him to lose rings. I believe this is like the parent telling his kids about his childhood, causing the child to feel older, or maybe demanding that he grow up. I haven't worked out this interpretation yet, but it's okay because nothing branches off of this little thing. And we go to the Marble Zone. Well, on the surface, it's obviously supposed to be the city of Catania being destroyed by the eruption of Mount Etna, with columns that are crumbling and stuff. Columns are obviously symbols of strength. Maybe you could say a phallus or something. But here I don't think so. I think it's morality and principle, I believe. At least I tend to see them that way. This is Sonic learning that the principles he holds have at their foundation nothing but, crap. It appears that this zone is telling Sonic that the foundation of his principles is crap, but obviously rivers of crap wouldn't do so well in a video game, and so lava was used instead. I know I had a few dreams involving Greek architecture with rivers of crap underneath. I remember a dream where parents were in the basement of a Greek Colosseum-type building, surrounded by columns, baptizing their children in a river of crap, pouring crap on their children and dunking them in crap in kind of a ceremonious fashion. And I believe most can interpret that pretty easily. More evidence that crap, not lava, was in the mind's eye of the developers is that Sonic doesn't die instantly when hit by the lava. And so there's more lava, and it's easier to get hit by the lava since you don't die instantly. Now, a more conventional interpretation of this level is that some volcano exploded and the city was covered in lava, like some cities in the Mediterranean in the past have, like Etna and Catania. This is plausible and more conventional, but it fails to explain these things, these little chutes here. Now, if this was a sewage system, it would make perfect sense to have pipes like this. Are we supposed to believe the architects just went, we should have some chutes here in the city in case the city gets overrun by lava? No, it's crap. The programmers just made it lava because that works better in a video game. And it has a more conventional theme of Catania being destroyed by a volcano. When Sonic goes underground, he finds rivers of shit and spikes. I had an aha moment when thinking about this because I had a dream just like this, and I think the creator did as well. The Catania and Mount Etna explanation doesn't really explain Sonic going into the architecture and going underground. There are large spikes and chains, columns underground that are meant to crush, wide tubes which carry in shit that tries to smother Sonic. All of these are meant to prevent Sonic from advancing, from getting through these things. These are all barriers to advancing. Why are these entries here so wide? Why aren't they rounded tubes like regular plumbing? Well, because being wider gives them a better chance to hit Sonic. They're trying to smother Sonic in bullshit when he explores the inner workings of his principles, mainly moral principles. And the reason I think that is because of the boss in the zone, morality. Boss in the zone, morality. Each platform represents is and ought. In between is a gap, the is-ought gap. There is no way to bridge this gap, right? There's just a bunch of crap. And so Sonic has to leap between the two to make a moral claim. His father goes back and forth in his car, attacking Sonic's moral claim, dumping crap on Sonic at either point. For example, Sonic says, This action leads to outcomes we subjectively perceive as good. Robotnik then comes over and says, okay, but why ought you do that which leads to the good? And then Sonic has to leap to the ought. And then Robotnik comes over and says, why ought you do that particular action? And this forces Sonic to leap back to a description of the action leading to good things. This is the perpetual problem of morality, the inability to bridge the is-ought gap. Now, I further believe Sonic is an atheist and Robotnik is a theist, and Sonic won only by attacking Robotnik, not by actually bridging the is-ought gap. So how does Sonic cope with not bridging the is-ought gap, not having a moral foundation? Well, here we go to the Spring Yard Zone. He copes with this with recreation and hedonism, as Spring Yard Zone represents. The springs, I think, represent drugs as they get you high, but coming down can be problematic. I think they represent drugs only in this level, because the zone is named after them. There are pits with rows of more powerful springs, which is like getting down off a high. Hitting these springs allows Sonic to gather more youthful rings when he's up high, and springs are found throughout video games, so this drug interpretation only applies to this level, I believe. Toward the end of the third act, it is revealed that there's nothing underneath all of this. Instead of a foundation of crap, there's no foundation at all, as these parts show. The boss is Robotnik chipping away at the floor, revealing a complete lack of foundation to Sonic's new lifestyle. Like in the Marble Zone, Sonic only wins by bashing Robotnik, not by repairing the underlying problem. He replaced the crap of morality with the emptiness of a hedonistic lifestyle. It was a coping mechanism. The Labyrinth Zone. Now Sonic is lost and faces an existential crisis, and so enters his own subconscious. Water represents the subconscious. I'm not a fan of archetypes for the most part, except for this one. Water equals subconscious, and that is an axiom that I'm just going to assert. As it turns out, Sonic's subconscious is filled with Robotnik's pests, including fish, which were leaping out of him earlier on. Although they're a little bit more tamer now that Sonic actually goes into his own subconscious. His subconscious is turbulent and full of barriers which he must break before he drowns. Sonic doesn't have to defeat Robotnik or anything in the zone. He must merely get through it, which makes sense because it's just his own subconscious. Sonic cannot swim and so relies on the rock around him, his principles, to climb out of his subconscious lest he drown. Though he can get some air that seeps through the cracks in the principles. If not for these cracks, Sonic would have drowned. What made those cracks through which the air travels? Why, Robotnik's little driller robots who attack Sonic's moral foundation. These attacks on the moral foundation, ironically, provide enough air to allow Sonic to get through his subconscious. I interpret this as childhood events deep in his subconscious that he may be ashamed of, but because of Robotnik drilling holes in his moral foundation, Sonic's morality has just enough cracks to allow Sonic's inner child to survive while wading through these memories. A cracked moral foundation makes Sonic less shameful and allows him to get through these memories. And of course, the only reason Robotnik's ideas are drilling through Sonic's moral foundation is because Sonic chose to rebel in the first place. There is no falling death in this level, which makes sense since it's Sonic's subconscious. There is nowhere to fall to. There is this little ball thing which does not look like the other robots. In the game it's treated as a robot, in the manual it's treated as a robot, but I don't believe in the developer's mind's eye this was a robot. I believe it is of Sonic's subconscious and becomes angry when it sees Sonic's inner child. I'm not sure how to interpret that. In the next zone it becomes more mild. My best interpretation is that it's a bad memory which Sonic has learned to deal with better after this ordeal. And of course this bad memory shows up when Sonic enters the subconscious and gets angry when it sees Sonic's inner child. At the end of the level, it is revealed that Robotnik's presence is deep in Sonic's subconscious, which Sonic realizes is responsible for all the barriers, spikes, and pests, and so Sonic chases his father out. Then we go to the Starlight Zone, and after doing all this in his subconscious, Sonic is flying fast through life on the road in the Starlight Zone. Sonic is running on roads, really going places on the road of life, but at the end, his father is still in the way. Sonic is in adulthood, but there are lots of bombs and spiky balls. There's these fans things, which you can interpret one way, maybe like, he can't, like a glass ceiling, he just can't get to places. Sonic believes he has chased Robotnik out of his life, but as he goes through the Starlight Zone, there becomes more signs that this is not the case. The spike balls are unresolved parental problems, which Sonic has to seesaw with in order to avoid lest he lose his youth. The bombs are actually more parental hang-ups, but Sonic tries to avoid them before they explode and cause problems in his new life. As much as Sonic doesn't want this to be the case, at the end of the zone, it's Robotnik's. Robotnik drops a combination of the two enemies in the zone, spike balls and bombs, and so he drops spike ball bombs. My interpretation is that these bombs are social graces that are navigated around, and Sonic must launch them, must seesaw with them back at Robotnik while avoiding them himself. This is a very awkward encounter, probably the result of some family reunion, and this compels Sonic to take his father head on, which goes into the Scrap Brain Zone. And this is the Scrap Brain Zone, and the name of the zone is telling. It's his father's brain, the scrap brain, right? The brain zone. It's obviously not Sonic's brain. The background makes the zone seem incredibly large, and this, like the rest of the game, is just a dream exaggeration. As you know, when you have dreams, dreams are much more dramatic and much larger than real life. For example, if you're hungry, you may have a dream of yourself eating tons and tons of donuts, and then you wake up, and you just eat one cookie and you're fine. Or you have a dream where you're peeing for hours on end, then you wake up and you pee for 5 seconds and you go back to sleep or something. So dreams tend to exaggerate what's going on and what is needed to be done. And this, I believe, is happening in these little zones here. Sonic is finally combating his father intellectually, not just to escape his clutches, but to defeat him and prove him wrong outright. The zone is high energy and powerful. There is fire, buzzsaws, electricity, and pests all over the place. The debates are fiery. The conveyor belts and various falling and spinning platforms represent the twists of argumentation, and the electricity represents the fierce energy of this confrontation. And that's another thing, I believe, that electricity represents energy in dreams. When you have lots of electricity, there's lots of dangerous energy somehow, and that has to be interpreted with the other context of the dream. The only enemy specific to this level is the ball hog. Since Sonic and Robotnik are having hard argumentation, the hog, I believe, represents the speech. That is, Robotnik keeps talking and prevents Sonic from talking. That is, he's hogging the speaking time, which makes perfect sense on this level in particular, since Sonic and Robotnik are having their father-son confrontations. Even though Sonic is able to pierce all of his father's high-powered intellectual defenses, and not that I mean that's high-powered intellect, that is, I believe it's high energy and it's mildly intellectual. He's able to go through all of this. There is still an emotional barrier between him and his father at the very end, as is pointed out in a special, Sega Genesis cinematic thing. This forces Sonic back into his subconscious, and Sonic then learns he didn't really finish the job of clearing out his own subconscious, which is why he can't break that emotional barrier. Once he does this, though, Sonic is able to break through the emotional barrier with his father and engage in the final debate. And this is a very powerful debate as seen by the pistons, and a very high energy one as seen by the electric orbs. In the background is a, it looks like a womb. Right? It's pink, it's kind of that shaped, so you can interpret that as you wish. So Sonic is able to break through the emotional barrier and ends up in this place, where he's fighting Robotnik in the most high-powered and electric debate in the game. When Sonic beats Robotnik, Robotnik flies away, finally abandoning the scrap brain zone. Sonic then runs home, and that's the end. Don't worry about me being an asshole to you on videos like these. These are not political videos, and so disagreement doesn't carry the same weight. I just had fun doing this. I don't take this too terribly seriously. Yeah, I just don't take this very seriously, and I'll just leave it at that. If you enjoyed this video, I'll be posting more like this, and so you should rate, comment, and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, well then I hope you die, and goodbye.